Sherman is a 20-year member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Democrat from Porter Ranch. Congressman, thanks for taking the time.
Good to be with you.
So articles of impeachment, if I understand correctly, when the president fired James Comey and then went to Lester Holt from NBC News and said, I fired him in part because I don't like this Russia probe, for you that was grounds of an impeachable act. Do I have that right?
That wasn't the most important. First, you can't impeach a president for being reckless or racist or wrong. You can impeach for high crimes and misdemeanors. That includes obstruction of justice, which under the Federal Criminal Code is a felony. When you try to halt or thwart or delay a federal criminal investigation, that is obstruction of justice, that is a felony. And the first instance of it was in February when the president asked, directed, threatened in order to get James Comey, the FBI director, to stop the investigation of Michael Flynn, who had lied on his reports in order to get his security clearance, lied about hundreds of thousands of dollars he got from the Turkish government and over $40,000 from the Russian government. Then second was the instance that you brought up. He fired Comey, both because Comey wouldn't curtail the investigation of Flynn, but also for the purpose of thwarting the investigation in Russian collusion. And on a third instance in July, the president used the media to communicate to Mueller that Mueller was threatened, would be fired if Mueller looked at Trump's personal finances.
We're talking about the special counsel Robert Mueller.
Right. So you've got three different instances. The third, I think, is not as strong as the first two, but they all amount to obstruction of justice. And obstruction of justice is a crime even if it's inept, even if it's unsuccessful.
Why not just wait for Robert Mueller to finish his investigation?
We don't need to wait until we know all of the high crimes and misdemeanors Trump has committed. He's committed
But a thorough investigation. Your colleagues have said that.
Well, my colleagues...
Your Democratic colleagues.
Yeah, the politics of it might be otherwise. This is a legal analysis.
Right. But
and the one rule of law is that you can't say, well, don't prosecute someone who's committed a crime until you investigate all the other crimes they might have committed.
Right, but to that point, it's more than politics. David Axelrod, who's a former advisor in the White House to President Obama, he said this to CNN. He's very concerned. If people get a sense that there is some extraordinary measure that's going to be taken to effect what they would view as a bloodless coup. Remember, a third of the country supports this president. That's a very dangerous road to go down. And if you ever did go down that road, you're opening a Pandora's box that will never end. Your friend Roger Stone, you met at Politicon in Pasadena a couple of weeks ago, the architect, some would say, of Donald Trump's presidency. He went even further. He says, try to impeach him. Just try it. You will have a spasm of violence, an insurrection in this country like you have never seen before. Both sides are heavily armed. It's more than politics.
This is parallel to Watergate. Richard Nixon had overwhelming support. George McGovern had carried only one state. Richard Nixon carried 49 states. About a year after the burglary of the Watergate Hotel offices were discovered, articles of impeachment were filed. And a year after that, there was finally a vote in the Judiciary Committee. About a year after the cyber burglary of the DNC, same office, just a cyber burglary rather than physical burglary, was discovered, I filed articles. It'll probably be a year, perhaps longer, before there's a vote in the Judiciary Committee. And that vote will not occur until there is a tremendous change in public opinion.
So how much of a change? Right now, the president is polling at about 35 to 38% popularity. Most Republicans, of course, still very much support him. How much support in public opinion do you need for this to stand a chance?
I would think in the mid to high 20s, the president is in trouble. And we'll see, and it's much harder.
If his popularity
and look, for the president's popularity to drop from 46 to 36 is not near as big a deal as dropping from 36 to 26. But his future is in his own hands. If he ends the recklessness and the incompetence, and if Mueller doesn't discover a smoking gun of collusion, then my guess is we will never get to the point of impeachment. But if you continue to have a reckless, incompetent, and borderline racist administration, week after week after week. I mean, we're only 6-7 months into this presidency. Right. We're already talking about impeachment. The only question is, should we talk about it or talk about talking about it?
Right. The Wall Street Journal talked, and I mentioned this with Chuck Todd earlier this morning, that there's a divorce between the White House and the GOP leadership in Congress. Democrats seem to be holding back this past month of August because you don't interrupt your adversary if they're committing suicide. What do Republicans tell you off camera?
Well, they're in a box. They can't win a primary if they attack Trump. They know that in a general election, those who have swing districts and face real general elections know that a majority of their constituents want a check put on this presidency. And as Americans, they are worried and awestruck with the jaw-dropping incompetency of this administration.
Still, though, the Democratic Party is 0 for 4 when it comes to special elections.
They selected the game in the field. We're not 0 for 4. I'll give you the analogous example. The chief executive, Trump, chose 4 members of the House to appoint to the executive branch, knowing that they were slam dunk districts for the Republicans, and they did win, barely in a couple cases. We moved 1 Democrat into the executive branch of the state government. Javier Becerra is now part of the executive branch of state government, and his race was so overwhelming that you're not counting it in your totals.
Well, that's right, because there were 2 Democrats that ran against it.
There was a Republican on the ballot. He couldn't even make the runoff.
He didn't make the runoff.
Ossoff came close to Republican. You can't even name him.
That's complete gerrymandering, but you had a race in Georgia, District 6, that looks a lot like the suburban districts in Orange County, which you need to win in order for you to get a majority in the House. The point, though, is that the McClatchy News Service did a survey of 20 different Democratic candidates for Congress. They're not members. They are seeking a job. 18 of them would not say that they want to keep Nancy Pelosi. They just would not answer the question. Only 2 said they want to keep Nancy Pelosi as the House leader. Is it time for you to move on for new leadership in order to address and for your party to take advantage of the disarray that we're seeing on the Republican side?
Well, the disarray of the Republicans hurts us as well. I mean, I'd love to come on this show and talk about our plan for economic policy. But I'm much more likely to get a chance to come on this show to talk about Donald Trump and our message of a stronger economy, better messages is being drowned out as their message is being drowned out. The president seems to praise Nazis and nobody pays attention to a plan to lower the cost of prescription drugs.
Okay, to that degree, and the final question, where does this go? What is your gut telling you? Yes, you have articles having been introduced, but it all relates to what happens to Robert Mueller, whether he's fired by the president, whether he comes up with a report that shows that, yes, everything that you've said has backing and that this is where the nation has to go.
Well, half of it is Mueller, and if he gets fired, that's one thing. If he concludes, as I have, that the president's already established actions constitute a violation of Section 1512B3 of the Criminal Code, that's something. And if he finds new evidence, that could be huge. But the other half of it is, what does Trump do? Trump can act presidential on some occasions, and if he can keep doing that, he'll retain support, the support that he has now. But how can you predict politics in America in the era of Trump? Who knows what he's going to say tomorrow? You have no confidence that you're not going to have breaking news in 10 minutes of some radical and bizarre thing done by the President of the United States.
He's been good for the journalism industry, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Keep those ratings up.
Congressman Brad Sherman, thank you very much for joining us. I do
Good to be
appreciate it.